And we are not live for the First Strike podcast. This is KYT. Before we start the show, I'm going to plug our sponsor, FaceToFaceGames.com, the number one place to get your Magic the Gathering singles. This week, not a Magic the Gathering sale. It's a Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh sale, 15% off any single. And we got a special show tonight. We got Andy, Elliot, John in the house as always, but we got the most recent SCG Classic champion, Davies Clark, a man, little known fact, the very first ManaDeprived.com fan, the very first person to write a Jund article for my site. How's it going, Davies?
It's going well. It's going well. Thank you for having me on. Almost 10 years now that I've been a fan of UCAR. It's
actually been 10 years, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And I forgot. You were there, one of the few people that were there present for my first PTQ win.
I was actually, yeah. We went and we had a beer and I bought you a rose.
You bought me a rose.
Special
night. So you went down this past weekend. You took down Syracuse. So we're going to be talking about that. Yeah. We're going to get Final Nub's early impression on some Modern Horizons, what he's excited about, and what we've been playing Standard as we approach the Ottawa MCQ and, of course, the online MCQ. So let's go straight to you, Davies. Let's not waste any time. What did you play and why did you play it when everyone expects you to play extra turns?
Sure, yeah. Well, I actually did play extra turns in the main event. I was the only person in my car not to day two with Bant Nexus. David Schneier and Matt Stein were my car mates, and the three of us were feeling pretty good about the deck. I was not skilled or fortunate enough to make day two. A little bit tired at the end of the day, so I just was looking around for a different deck. I just wanted to play anything else. So I started asking all the Montreal people in New York, do you have any cards? Do you have any cards? Finally, Christopher Leonard had, huge shout out to him, just took out his binder and said, I have some cards. Do you want to play an aggro deck? And he just started taking out, okay, you'll need Stomping Grounds, I guess. Here's some Rootbound Crags. And we built Binder Gruul. It was very, very hastily thrown together. A lot of the numbers may not make sense, and the reason is, well, there was only one Vivian in the binder, stuff like that. So we put it together. Matt Stein actually all night took it way too seriously and tuned and crafted the list with me, and then I swept the tables in the Classic on Sunday. The only loss that I had in the Swiss was to Mono Red because I drew both of my Mobilized District, which was basically Mutavault all weekend. I drew the two in the main deck in games 1 and 2. Couldn't cast a single spell, but the rest was not close.
So what do you think the Nexus positioning is right now? Bad?
I don't think it's good. A lot of decks are playing Small Teferi, and Small Teferi just feels very, very difficult for the Nexus deck. You're looking to abuse your end step, and when everything is sorcery speed, that deck is not impressive.
I do know that even though you're known as a turns expert, you only picked it up last week when David Schneier said he had the Nexus deck built for you, ready for the MCQ. So I'm not sure how in tune you are with the latest developments in the archetype. Brad Nelson posted how he felt the Bant Nexus version that he's piloting is the very best version. I don't know if you heard anything about that or any Bant versions.
Well, I did play Bant at the Open. So did my carmate Matt Stein, who made top 32. Schneier, who just missed top 32, I believe. We felt Bant was very, very well positioned. Having access to a sweeper after board, having access to Deputy of Detention was very, very powerful. That card was very important all weekend for everyone in the car. I would say the biggest upgrade from White, though, was probably just having access to Dawn of Hope after sideboard. I think that's the name of the card. The enchantment that pumps out 1/1 lifelinks.
Guys, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, Dawn of Hope.
Yeah, Dawn of Hope. That card was very important, actually. It came in a lot of sideboarded matches. It makes chump blockers and lifelinkers against aggro. It gives you inevitability against all the control decks that you can activate even with a small Teferi. That card actually performed very well for everyone in the car.
So I don't know how close like, was your team aware of Brad's version? I don't know how close it is, where he's playing 1 Deputy of Detention in the main, 3 Tamios, 3 Big Teferis, and 4 Revitalize in the main. I don't know if that's anywhere close to where your ban list was.
It's actually pretty close. We had just the 1 Deputy, but in the board. We weren't playing Revitalize, but we were playing. We had been aware of Brad's list. We weren't exactly on his list, but it was pretty similar. We were on a slightly different Planeswalker configuration with 2 Tameo, 3 Big Teferi, 2 Small Teferi.
Okay, and but even with that, you think it's not that well positioned in the format, even though
I don't. Yeah, I think Small Teferi being a 3 to 4 of in many of the decks. If we just take a look at the open, I think there were 3 or 4 decks in the top 8 with 4 Small Teferi. I think that's pretty impressive if you're trying to cast instants at 7.
Okay, so let's go back to Gruul. Where do you see like crushing it with the Binder version? So is the full-fledged version a real contender?
Absolutely. Even with Binder Gruul, some of the draws just felt very unfair. Turn one Elf into turn 2 Warboss into turn 3 Domri felt like cheating. I felt like I was cheating. I think I won finals by going turn 2 Domri, turn 3 Chandra, turn 4 Sarkhan. Obviously, that's a very fortunate draw, but I don't think much beats that.
John, have you run into this deck in the queues?
Yeah, I've played a few Gruul mid ranges that just happened to be more Planeswalker heavy, and yeah, they got really efficient beaters. They got mana acceleration, and they can just like kill you out of nowhere with Sarkhan. I'm actually pretty impressed by it. I think it's got a pretty good matchup against Red and probably against the Planeswalker deck as well. So I would venture a guess and say it folds to Nexus and a few others, but like otherwise, like I think Gruul is a pretty big sleeper. I think mass manipulation, for example, would walk all over this, but I don't know. Seems pretty good to me.
Davies, what were you afraid to face with this deck? What matchup felt close?
So I didn't actually get to play against it, but the matchup I was most worried about was anything playing Oketra. I just didn't think I could beat a stream of 4/4s. However, I didn't face any of that. Actually, my matchups in the Swiss were blue-black control, Sultai Rock, mono red 2 times, mono white Splash Teferi, 2 of the, I guess it's Reanimator, the 4-color Planeswalker commanding Dreadhorde. Bring everything back deck. That was my 2 final rounds of the Swiss, and then in top 8 I played Esper Hero, Mono Red, and Esper Hero. So
and smashed them all.
All of them. None of them were close. It didn't really come up. I think maybe a Planeswalker deck could have given me some trouble. Bant Nexus, I think they definitely have game against you, but you kind of put them in a scenario where they always have to have it. When they do, you lose for sure because you can't interact with them. And then Oketra. I think if they turn 3, turn 4 Oketra, and then can just pump out a few 4/4s, you can't do anything about that.
But no one's playing Oketra, so.
Well, then that's more bias that I have, because for the past 2 weeks while I was playing Nexus, all I got paired against were these weird flash Bant decks that played 4 Teferi off Llanowar Elf, crazy things like that. So maybe I'm biased, but those were some of the things that I was losing to with Nexus.
So how would you tweak the deck if you weren't limited by the binder?
Well, now that I've had a little bit of time to reflect and I'm going over the list, there actually aren't too many changes I'd make. The Lightning Strike, there's a one-off Lightning Strike would become Chandra's Triumph. That card just seems like it'd be a bit better. You're not looking to point at a player. You're always looking to kill something.
One of Lightning Strike. Okay.
One of Lightning Strike. Yeah, I didn't want 4 shocks. Come on, I didn't want to be that guy. A few small tweaks like that, but nothing major. The sideboard definitely needs to change. It was just a lot of, I guess this card's good, I guess that card's good. Probably something to go bigger for the mirror. Maybe a Carnage Tyrant or 2, something like that. But it actually wasn't that far off. Other than the 1 Cindervines, every sideboard card got boarded in multiple times. Everything was used. Direfleet Daredevil performed really, really well as a 2 of. I'd probably go to 3. And Mobilized District was an absolute house. If I didn't mention it before, it was Mutavault most of the time. It was a 3/3 Vigilant Mutavault. That card was insane.
I don't know how many people decided to copy Binder Gruul right away after you took it down. John, we'll go straight to you while we have you here. You've been still crushing the queues, skewering people, as you would put it, and you've experimented with Mobilized District in the sideboard. Tell us how that development has been going and where you're at now with the list.
Yeah, so I've seen online a significant increase in both the Planeswalker decks, which is like Jeskai or Esper, for example. Like Esper Controls basically evolved into Esper Super Friends, like, which is kind of logical, I guess. Like Chemistry's Insight is bad against Narset, counter spells are bad against Narset, etc. So you're more likely to succeed if you're more a tap out sort of a control. And then the Command the Dreadhorde deck as well. So I kind of wanted a bit more help against them, and I found that once the Super Friends deck stopped playing nonsense like the Mox Amber plus Fibblefib package and played real cards, like in the Jeskai deck there is the Clarion Shock package, in the Esper one there's the Vraska's Contempt, Cry of the Carnarium, Kaya's Wrath, Moment of Craving package. It's actually pretty hard to like knock them down. Like a lot of their Planeswalkers are must kill, so they essentially start at like 30 life. And if that's the case, then I want to make sure I go bigger in the post board, and I wanted the 21st land. So I saw a funky Japanese list that had a mono-red list that had a Mobilized District, 2 of them in the sideboard. I'm just like, you know what? It dodges a lot of sorcery speed removal, like the Teferi Bounce or the Kaya's Wrath and whatnot. It's good at running Planeswalkers down, and it's another land source. And yeah, it's been very good so far. Like I started off as a joke, but the more I played it, and the more it worked out well for me. So in my MCQ this week and next week, I might just play it. The other mono red development for me, I've been doing pretty well, is Sorcerer's Spyglass. I've been testing. I just want something to shut down the linchpin of these like big Planeswalker decks. So for Jeskai, it's like Sarkhan or Teferi Time Raveler, since Teferi can bounce it. For Esper, it's like Hero Dominaria or Teferi as well. And I'm hoping that can buy significantly more time than the one card I spent and outgrind them. So far the testing shows that these changes have been good. I'm going to keep working at it, but I still feel pretty good about Red. I mean, in the 3 weeks of turbulent standard with this new format, Red has been the only real constant in the top 8. So I'm going to keep working at it.
That's good to hear, and shouts to your guide who has helped people qualify for the Mythic Championship. You get access to this guy by being a patron. We'll go to patreon.com/firststrike. And not only that, people have been giving your guide to players, and that allowed them to top 8 not only the SCG Open, but the SCG Classic. And that's from asking Detective Dollywall. That's what he said. He got the info from you, passed him along, and those guys were able to top 8. So shouts to you, my man. And well, let's actually keep it to standard. Let's see how much we can go through before you got to go. Andy, you've been playing the one of the hottest new decks. Not that hot anymore because it's on everyone's radar. Command the Dreadhorde. How's it going? How's it going with the deck?
Yeah, the deck's really impressive, honestly. It's like I think Elliot posted it in our group chat, and initially we were all like, "That's pretty bad," and then Elliot's kind of like, "Maybe it's not bad," and then like as time went on, we're like, "Maybe it's not bad," because I kept playing like fair decks. I was playing the Planeswalker decks, and then out of nowhere, my opponent would cast this card, and you only have like 2 counterspells in your whole deck, and then all of a sudden they have this board position that's absolutely unbeatable, and then they get a Tamiyo on the field, they get the Dreadhorde back, and then just like I could wrath them every turn of the game and I will lose, and that's pretty frightening. And it reminds me a lot of the Rally the Ancestor deck. It's not as good, but you just play a normal like mid-range game and you can win lots of games like that, and then you go so far over the top of everything. It doesn't matter what your opponent's doing. You can go to like 100 life. You can go to like just have like lethal. You can do an end step Command the Dreadhorde with little Teferi, and then your opponents just can't do anything about it. And I think it's one of the better decks in the format, but the format's evolving so fast that I think if you look at the MPL decks this week, I think the Japanese broke it. I think they broke it, and they're going to change the format, I think, forever, because they put 4 Assassin's Trophy and 4 Field of Ruin in their deck, and the Jeskai Walker's deck plays 0 basics. The Dreadhorde's decks plays 0 basics. And so what I noticed, I was like, wow, that seems crazy. So on Moto, I fired up a league with like some trophies in my main deck. And in the mirror, I'm like, on the play, I'm like, trophy your land. And then on turn 4, I'm like, trophy your land, Tameo, bring it back, trophy your land. And they're dead. They're dead on the spot. They can't keep up. The mana's like already loose in the deck. You can't afford to lose a land. Like, I think that's going to change the way these decks are built, and maybe it could even affect the mana. Like, I'm 100% going to put a basic in my deck. At least 1, and maybe even have to put 2, which means maybe you have to make some sacrifices in how hard you're splashing. But I think the Japanese are they really got ahead of this one. These Jeskai decks with 0 basics. Jeskai decks with no basics. Like, they can afford to play a basic. I'm not sure the Dreadhorde deck really can, but I'm going to have to. But I think that right there is just some great being ahead of the curve, and I think that's the thing that's going to be on everyone's mind come next week and come this weekend, is the people who aren't in the know on the basic lands are going to get crushed by some of these people who are just kind of in the know on how you have to build your decks now.
I think you're going to have to be prepared if you're playing the online one. I think this might be, I'm not sure how fast people are going to adjust, let's say at the Ottawa MCQ. That would be interesting for me to see. Go ahead.
But the people you're worried about are always the people like who have adjusted, right? It's the people who win these things who are the people who are in tune with it and are a week ahead. And I think if you want to win the event, you have to be ready for those people. I don't think you can let it slide. And I think it's one of the most important lessons if you're going to play Dreadhorde or Jeskai this weekend is to put 1 to 2 basics in your deck.
I forgot to shout out John earlier about him already coming to conclusions that in Martin Jew's guide, he came out with Mono Red on risk factor, on stuff like Wizard's Lightning being better than Skewer, even more so now with Wild Growth Walker being big play. So all these things John had told me in private before Jew's wrote his guide. But back to you, Andy. I want to talk to you about your specific card choices with Dreadhorde. Were there any conclusions that you were making with some of the flex slot, namely like whether you think Sorin was good or other things that you might have been tweaking with?
Yeah, so what happened is I noticed that a lot of the games against the aggro decks, I wasn't needing to draw Massacre Girl to win. And I thought there were so many situations that I looked against Mono White and even Red where I was like, if I play a Massacre Girl, it's not even solving my issues and it's an awkward card to draw. So I actually cut it immediately after maybe a league and was like, I don't ever want to draw this card. I don't want to put this card in my deck. So I cut it. And I think it's been, I don't know, the deck's been fine against a lot of the aggressive decks. Maybe suffers a little against Mono White because that matchup is a little tough sometimes based on your starts. And then the other key flex slot is like whether to play like Bond of Flourishing or like some 2-drop removal or maybe Sorin or something like that, like something to interact with the faster decks. And so originally I was playing a couple Sorins, but I just I noticed with the MPL deck list that nobody was playing Sorin. And so I tried, run a league without it and run some 2-mana removal. And then I got caught wind of like the Assassin Trophy tech, and so I just jammed some Assassin Trophies in my main deck and then won the mirror very easily because I was a land ahead. And I think originally I wasn't so high on Paradise Druid, but I think it's a necessity for speed, even though it's kind of crappy against Chain Whirler. But a lot of your cards generate so much advantage, so getting them out of turn faster is so important that you can sacrifice the late game draw. So I think Bond of Flourishing, no good. I think Sorin can be a 1 to 2 of in the main deck and be good. It's like good at killing planeswalkers as well. And I think Massacre Girl is not where you want to be.
So one more question as we got to scan through some of these MPL lists, Andy, to pick your brain. Maybe Ephro caught wind of this new tech already, but he goes ahead and plays the Dreadhorde, cutting all the white, cutting one of the best cards in the format, Teferi at 3, but making his mana base more smooth, gets to play some amount of basics in his deck. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it. What do you think about it? He's playing 5-mana Nissa instead, and he's got Hydra Krasis in there. He's got 2 Hostage Taker, and the rest is basically the Dreadhorde deck.
Yeah, I've looked at this deck. I played it through a league. I have played it through a couple leagues, actually. And I like a lot of what it has going on. But what ended up being one of the big problems against any of the Esper decks is their counter magic is so good against you. Like, you play all these things at sorcery speed, that I found Teferi was just absolutely the key, because they tap out for 3 on a walker, almost for whatever planeswalker, almost every time. You land a Teferi, you plus it, and then all of a sudden you're just getting to control the game, and they never get to counter anything. They get put in awkward positions all the time. And I thought it just ended up being so important to the deck that I was willing to sacrifice the mana. And that's kind of where I landed on it. I like a lot of the things with Nissa, and I like Hydroid Krasis, actually, even though it's like obviously bad to get back. But basically, I just ended up wanting to go over the top and wanting to have 3-mana Teferi. I think it's too important. Also, this deck folds to Nexus, which I'm not sure how many you'll see. But the only reason you have like a good shot against Nexus game 1 is because you have 3-mana Teferi in your main deck, and then post-board, like, you don't have counter spells, you have like 2 discard spells or something, so you're really relying on Teferi to help with that matchup. So I think I like Ephro's deck. It could be good, but I would stick with 4-color for now. But let's say everyone starts adopting this trophy Field of Ruin thing, then this is like a perfect place to go after that, right? It gets to play Llanowar Elves, and I was just talking about how important getting ahead with Planeswalkers is. The problem with this deck is that this deck only plays the 2 Planeswalkers, right? So it doesn't get to take advantage of attacking from multiple angles while gaining card advantage like the Dreadhorde deck gets with 3-mana and 5-mana Teferi. And that's a pretty important angle of attack for your inevitability. And a lot of the time with the 4-color deck, you just like play your Planeswalkers that draw cards, 3 and 5-mana Teferi, and you just let them die because you're going to get them back later. But you don't get the same kind of staying power out of Ephro's Sultai deck.
Your mention of Paradise Druid and Llanowar Elves and stuff like that makes me think. I gotta plug. It's your favorite new podcast, so I'm gonna plug it. Table for Two, my podcast with Alexander Hain. A great opportunity to get some content from the guy who admits himself is very lazy to produce content. So he needs a guy like me to go out of his way to go eat with him, have dinner with him, pay some amount of the time to get some good, high-quality content. And what he felt about the format is that we're in a format where getting ahead early is really important, that mana elves, the sacrifice of drawing them later in the game, like not being that good, is worth it because of how far ahead it gets you with some of these cards, whether it's Planeswalkers. And I think in Davies' case, like being able to play a Legion War Boss on turn 2 on the play is probably, in a lot of cases, unbeatable, right, Davies? Like a lot of your Llanowar Elves draws, I feel, are probably quite impressive.
I would absolutely agree. I don't think I lost a game where I went turn 1 Elf, turn 2 3-drop. I'm pretty sure you just get so far ahead. And I think even some of the most oppressive turns my opponents took on the Dreadhorde deck, for example, going plus small Teferi, end of turn Dreadhorde, bring back your Sarkhan, my Sorin, and a bunch of guys. All my guys have lifelink plus attack. I was still able to kill them from 35 because I was so ahead. Just throughout the game, just having 3 or 4 Planeswalkers, developing everything earlier. Llanowar Elf is the most oppressive card in Standard right now.
I think people have been trying to figure out the best. Like, you want turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Teferi, stuff like that, and trying to figure out the best turn 2 play. And when I look at your deck, I see, like, because they have to deal with it, and if they do, you're going to follow it with a 4-drop Planeswalker in your deck. And I think that's like just Andy said, with some decks that can able to attack from different angles and get ahead so fast with Mana Excel in the early game. I think that's a tough combo, and that's why you felt so unbeatable throughout on Sunday.
Yeah, I like a lot what's going on with Davies' Gruul list. So what I've noticed is, from my point of view, from playing like the Planeswalker decks and the other decks, is that the whatever Gruul Spellbreaker is like a stone cold Planeswalker killer. It just kills a Planeswalker every time it comes into play. And when you have your Llanowar Elf draws, there's almost no deck that's going to keep up with how hard you're going to hit and fast. And what the Planeswalkers do is that even when someone kind of goes over the top of you, with Sarkhan, you just fly over the top of them and kill them. So, like, while originally I looked at Davies' list and I thought there's only one Lightning Strike, he's going to get crushed by a Wild Growth Walker. I think he does have the out because of Sarkhan. I think if I were to build a Gruul deck, I would have more copies of Lightning Strike because of Wild Growth Walker. And I like Shock's pretty good. Shock's very good. But I think Lightning Strike's a bit better right now.
That's definitely the conclusion I came to after the weekend as well. Shock was great because I played red 3 times. I played Esper Hero twice in top 8. It takes out a lot of their creatures, but overall, most of the time, I probably would have been happier with a 3 damage spell, which is why after a little bit of reflection, I'm trending more towards not just Lightning Strike, but also the Chandra's Triumph. The times that you want to point it at a player are so few and far between, and the handful of times you're going to get an additional 2 points of damage out of it, pointing it at Teferi, the just plussed, or a Lyra at a medium turn of the game, turn 5, 6, 7 is really, really impressive. And Lava Coil is also something that I've got 2 copies on the board that's probably going to be bumped up to 3, because not only does it kill something of a Wild Growth Walker size, it makes sure it cannot come back, which is something that Death Gorge Scavenger, as I called him, Garbage Dino all weekend, was a card that performed very, very well because you could just chip away at their graveyard. By the time they could cast a Dreadhorde, there was nothing impressive to get back.
Okay, Davies, what do you say to all this standard talk? Are you going to Ottawa? What's your plan this weekend?
I'm definitely going to Ottawa, yeah. I have a car that I somehow all convinced to be on Binder Gruul. So we've got at least 3 or 4 people that are going to be there. Most of them playing about the same list. A few people are iffy about a few cards. Collision Colossus is not very exciting to everyone, but for the most part, yeah, I think we're on a very similar list.
Elliot, what about you? Let's go to you.
Well, I'm going to Providence this weekend, so I haven't been doing too much standard testing outside of, kind of birding Andy when he's on Hangouts and watching streams, talking to people. Like, I haven't been playing games myself. I've done a couple drafts to prepare because it's team sealed, which is, I think, the closest analog you can get without, having people there to build a sealed pool with. And I don't want to say I like our chances. Obviously, whenever you go to a team event like this, you end up running into some teams that have come from all across the country and the continent of like pros and stuff. I know Hayne mentioned he's playing with, I think, Tom Martell and Sigrist, I think, is their third as well. So like that's just one of many teams of where if you're going to do well in this tournament, you're going to be facing the Murderers Row.
Yeah, definitely.
But on the back of every card, it says both Magic and The Gathering, so we're going to go and enjoy some of The Gathering.
Sounds good. We got John for like 5 more minutes. So, John, break it down. The floor is yours. What are you most excited about in Modern Horizons? And then we're going to ask Davies if he's already like brewing some stuff in Modern for turns, any new weapons. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I think one of the more obvious one is the auntie of runes, so to speak. What is it called? Giver of runes here. I think it can fit in a lot of spots, and I think they did very well balancing the card because it cannot protect itself. The other notable difference is that it includes colorless, which means that someone can block Big Eldrazi that doesn't have trample indefinitely. So that's kind of cool. And I figure a deck like Devoted Druid and Humans would pick it up, which is interesting. There is the, what is it? I don't know the English name. It was spoiled in Portuguese, but there's the 1 mana target creature becomes a 6/4 that I think will slot right into Infect. It doesn't work well in multiples, but I figure it'll probably replace some number of mutagenic growth and enable more and more turn 2s. It doesn't fix the fundamental problems of the card, which is, the printing of Fatal Push, basically, but I think it definitely helps. Fact of fiction, probably like Caleb Schur said that he might consider it as a supplement, not a substitute for pieces of the puzzle, which does make sense to me. And there's the, I gotta mention my deck Grishel brand here. Season Pyromancer might be a bit interesting here. It's a 3 mana body. It discard 2, draw 2, and you make some tokens if you discard non-land cards. So it's an enabler, and it's a body it's like potentially 3 bodies to stall the board with. Kind of interesting. And the other, Goblin Matron. If they reprint Ringleader, I will definitely try to make that work. And the other one I'm excited about is a card called Fist of Flame, which is 1 red instant. It says draw a card. Until the end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +1/+0 for each card you've drawn this turn. So I was thinking like this is a more clean way to win off of 1 Griselbrand and 2 activations, because it would give it +14/+0. But it and only needs like 2 Simian Spirit Guides, so it's a lean and mean way to finish the kill in Griselbrand. The problem is 1, removal, which the Borbergmos kill does not care about, and 2, Ensnaring Bridge, which Borbergmos also does not care about, and 3, you can win at instant speed with Borbergmos, which this one can't. But given that it draws a card already, like it might just like replace Metamorphose and just be a one-off as a more lean win condition, but we'll see. Between the Pig, which by the way, the Mox main event had 2 Spanish or Portuguese players with Glorious Vengeance on it, so shout out to them. There's with the Eoharg, the Raise Boar in the main deck as well. Between this and the Fist of Flames, I'm pretty excited to brew up Reanimator in Modern. I'm probably not going to be a top tier or even tier 2 option, but one can dream.
So only 73 or 73 plus 1 according to MTG Salvation Cards of as well. It sounds like you're pretty excited for the set, John.
Yeah, there's so much nostalgia and callbacks. Like Ranger Captain of Eos, like that's a bit lazy, but there's like other callbacks, right? There's a Force of Negation. There's the Green Force that I think is pretty good. And yeah, like there's a lot of things that call back to when I first started playing Magic during Invasion Mercadian Masks. So I'm very excited for the new modern era with the War, which already has a lot of busted cards like the 3 mana Planeswalkers and more Modern Horizons. So I'm looking forward to doing a lot of brewing and testing in the upcoming few months.
Sounds good. You heard it here first from the GOG. I'll let you go, John. We'll let you go. All right.
Take care, guys.
Sometimes with him joining the show, Andy, I forget our initial reaction to this guy when you told me about him. He is the guy. His brain's already tinkering Modern and Legacy. Kind of nuts.
Yeah, he just doesn't stop. He cares so much about that deck.
He already thought like 3 reasons Bogor Rigmos is still better than Griselbrand. Davies, have you? I know you love your decks, your archetypes. You're known for them. You've got a legion of followers. You've got like people you've met on Reddit or whatever. Have you thought that far ahead with this new set? Are there toys for you?
There aren't. I've had nightmares, and I'm thinking of abandoning the turns deck. I think blue is so miserable right now with Narset, which is popping up in these like mono blue mid-range or aggro decks to just stop people from drawing cards. I mean, I got Factor Fiction, which is end of turn win the game, added to the toolbox that the extra turns deck can play, and I'm just so terrified because it's the only card that doesn't say draw an extra card in the whole deck. No, I think I think actually blue is probably not where you want to be right now because everything else is getting some very interesting tools. If I do want to be playing combo in Modern, with Matron being back, I think there's probably a Dirty Kitty or a Goblin Storm deck that's just around the corner with Fecundity, Skirk Prospector. Now that all those cards exist in Modern again, I think there might be something there.
All right. Okay. I'm not used to seeing this lack of enthusiasm for the extra turns deck, but let's go to you, Elliot. I mean, we discussed in our private chats about some of the new cards, and let's get your impression. I don't think you agreed with John, or you didn't think Scale Up, which is the thing that turns a creature to a 6/4, was going to help Infect that much because of its positioning in the metagame?
Yeah, I think that, Infect hasn't been good since the banning of Gitaxian Pro, which kind of coincided with Fatal Push getting printed. So maybe death by two cuts, as it were, with those two things happening. But definitely its problem for as long as it's been in Modern, why it wasn't totally dominating 100%, and why it hasn't been very good in the past couple of years, is not lack of quality pump spells. But the deck is would be totally happy playing just Mutagenic Growth, Become Immense, Might of Old Crozer, and maybe some copies of Groundswell. Didn't need Scale Up to be a functioning deck. Will Scale Up be an improvement? Sure. I think people were talking about on Twitter, someone mentioned if you take untapping with Glistener Elf on turn 2 against a deck that can't block, you're probably 60% to win that game anyway. But now you're playing Scale Up and you're 70% to win that game. So it's not actually that big of an improvement. On the other hand, what the deck was really missing was something like Ataxian Probe to get information of when can you go all in, something to give it a bit of staying power maybe. In the past, people have played things like, I think Corpse Cur is the name of the card, where it just gets back other Infect creatures. These are kind of bad cards that you have to play in Infect just to have a chance against the decks that are playing a lot of efficient interaction against you. Maybe even of the cards spoiled, I don't think that Scale Up's even the best card for Infect. I think that it's possible that the Horizon Canopy blue-green land has a bigger impact on Infect than Scale Up. As obviously Scale Up is a slam dunk in some number of copies. Don't get me wrong. If you're going to play Infect, it's there, but it doesn't fix the deck's problems. It even sort of makes them worse, since it's a sorcery that you have to commit to playing in a world of Fatal Push, Path to Exile. People like Lightning Bolt is quite popular in terms of the Is It Phoenix deck, but there was a long time in Modern where decks' only interaction was Lightning Bolt, and they were drawing one card a turn. So even the decks that were playing interaction, you could still beat up on them. But now it's things like Path to Exile, Fatal Push, Field of Ruin is very popular, Ghost Quarter is very popular. Your Ink Moths aren't safe. It's probably not a safe time to be playing Infect.
What do you think about the set so far overall? I don't know if you're the type to already try to build decks in your head or not, like John, but what do you think about the set so far?
I think that definitely the best cards spoiled are the cycle of Horizon Canopy lands. I think those are going to make a huge impact. The fact that there's 8 of them that are red is, I think, a huge boon to the mono red deck or the burn deck. You can just basically never flood out with a deck that the one problem it has is not drawing enough spells. All it cares about is drawing basically seven spells and trying to cast them, ideally by turn 4 or 5 at the latest. So the fact that you can turn your extra lands into spells in the late game, I think, is a big boon to burn. People also playing additional copies of a Pain land is going to help. So I think that might be something to look out for. I think that Force of Negation, this is something we sort of talked about when Modern Horizons got announced. We spent a lot of back and forth on the podcast. I thought that, it was maybe possible to just put Force of Will into Modern. Obviously, this is a lot worse, but I think it's a pretty interesting inclusion where it's definitely not going to warp things, but I think it's nice to have access to in the format. I think we're going to see a few copies played by decks like Blue-White. Already we're seeing a couple Dovin's Vetoes or stuff in that slot in the deck, and they have something around 25 to 30 blue cards, so I think it's relatively free to play in terms of not warping your deck for the additional to be able to pay the alternate cost, which I think is going to be the downfall of pretty much any other deck trying to play it. You do need to have, like 20 something blue cards in your deck to reliably be able to pitch to it. So any deck that's trying to do something unfair is going to be hard pressed to either be able to give up the card advantage, like a blue-white deck might be able to, just in order to not die, and have enough cards, like quality blue cards, available to them to be able to do it. So I don't know if this is going to be as big of a shakeup to the format as we saw in War of the Spark with all the good 3-mana planeswalkers, but I think it's going to definitely make some changes. And obviously we still have basically half the set to see, maybe fewer percentage of the rares and such, but I would be shocked if there's no commons or uncommons that ever see play that we haven't seen yet.
All right. What about you, Andy?
I echo most of the same feelings that Elliot has. So on the spectrum of like John, when a new set comes out, he like builds a bunch of decks and thinks about it a lot. When a new set comes out for me, and it's not like immediate that I have to play a tournament, I'll be honest, I just sit and wait. I wait until someone else figures it out. I don't get paid to figure this out, Car. I go to PTQs, and if it's not a PTQ, I ain't doing the work yet. So, but I have been thinking about like how the cards would fit in the format. Like new Nars set was super impactful, and like we're still like reeling and trying to figure out how to combat Nars set and Karn. That like this format is still in such major flux because of those two cards. I'm interested to see how it goes. I think we had a big discussion in our group about the Force of Negation. I don't think it's that good. I think it's like I'm glad it exists. I think it's basically like, so if you have like a lot of decks on main deck like Negate, I could see you main decking this card instead of Negate. But I think Dovin's Veto is so good that I'm not sure if it's better than that. But I think like your sideboard counter spells out of like blue control decks could certainly become this, because it's just so good against the combo decks, and that may be something that you're worried about. Because a lot of the time what combo decks try to do is just prey on the fact that you're not that mana efficient with your counter spells. So I think this is a good thing. Like, is it better than Dispel? I don't even know if it's better than that. So I guess we'll find out. But the Canopy lands, or the Horizon lands is probably a better name for them. They're A+. They're very good lands. They're 10 out of 10. They're crazy. So those are super powerful. And yeah, I can't. And maybe Lava Dart ends up being good. I don't even know about that. It's just there's a lot going on here, and I think we see with like powerful commons that I can only can't wait to see what else comes out at common and uncommon. That's super playable. As always, I'm trying to keep my eye on what could go into Is It Phoenix, because it's my favorite deck in Modern. And I don't know. I guess time will tell, and someone else will tell me.
Well, speaking of Phoenix, has anyone seen Scour All Possibilities? That's a card I actually just stumbled upon, and it's preordained for 2, but it flashes back for 5.
That's like 7 mana total. Someone linked me that and said if only it was an instant, and I told them to stop trying to make Think Twice happen.
Wow, it's not even an instant?
No, it's a sorcery.
It's preordained for 2.
No thanks. Discovery's probably better.
Yeah, like, I guess you can exile it to Force of Negation, but then you can't even flash it back, so what's the point?
Davies, man. Just getting excited over nothing.
What?
Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. You told me you're playing, is it the Arena MCQ?
The Arena MCQ.
What information have you learned about this tournament? Is there anything surprising other than like them making a statement that people can play it while playing Providence, but just make sure that they don't don't play at the same time?
Yeah, so I work on Saturday, and originally the announcement was like, oh, you can play all day Saturday. And I was like, oh, whatever, I don't care. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just play after work. And then I saw the announcement. It's like, you have to sign up like at 9 a.m., between 9 and 10. I start at 10. It's getting a little sketchy there. And then after, they're like, and your matches, they got to be done by 7 p.m. I'm like, Jesus, I work. I thought I was just going to do it all after. So it's getting quite precarious for me to play this event, but I'm going to do it. And so I actually was wondering. I was like, I wonder if I'm going to have enough opponents to finish my matches in time. Like, what if, like, I know there's 30-minute clocks, but like the Dreadhorde deck, it ain't fast sometimes. And I started to get worried. I'm worried right now.
I love how Davies is laughing at your misfortune, potential misfortune.
I thought I had it all. I was like, I'm not even going to book it off. I'm not even going to book the day off. I had the opportunity. I was like, no thanks. I'll work. I'll make the extra money. But yeah, we're going to have a wild ride. Basically what's going to happen is I'm going to like, my fiance will drive me home and I'll be like, don't talk to me. I have to do this. Like, I can't do anything else. And then I'll be sitting there and hopefully the gang will be in Discord. Actually, I guess Elliot won't be because he'll be in Providence playing Arena on someone else's account probably.
Whoa. I would never engage in account sharing and violate the terms of service
Yeah, it's not allowed, so you
of
can't.
Arena.
Plus, like, no one would ever share their password, I'm sure. But go ahead.
I was laughing though at your misfortune because I'm seeing on Twitter all these people going, I guess I'm double queuing this GP and this online WMCQ, and you've done just the honest thing of I'll play after work, and you're getting more punished than anyone else.
Yeah, because obviously I can't play at work. I work at a bank. I don't think it would fly just on the work computer. Just hold on one second, sliding the mouse forward, casting my spells. Listen, I'm about to time out a second time. You're going to have to wait. So I just wanted to get in my honest day's work. I didn't want to put the pressure on my boss of booking a day off. And now the pressure's really going to be on when I get off work. It'll be a fun ride, though. If I don't finish my matches in time, I'll be real mad at myself.
Yeah, one of my teammates for the tournament in Providence is qualified for the Arena MCQ, so I think it's going to be really interesting. I'd imagine that whatever decks we can build out of our sealed pool, he'll end up with the fastest possible one. And fingers crossed the venue has Wi-Fi, I guess. I definitely don't envy him. I know that in the MCQ in Montreal, he played mono red, so maybe he'll just be able to run that back and finish his matches real quick. But if you're in the unfavorable position of having to play in between rounds, I hope I get paired against your deck in the GP. I hope that you can concede to me on turn 5 to go play your Arena MCQ match, and we can move on.
Man, I'm wondering how many people are bringing their laptops to Providence. And Andy, is there consideration for you to play the Davies Gruul deck instead then?
No, but like I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's not my style, right? Like, so here's the thing.
It's fast. It's fast. You need it to
too fast. I like to slow it down a little. I like a slow dance. I'm not out here doing the EDM music. I like to take it easy. But yeah, that's actually maybe a weakness of mine. It's like I often just like to play like mid-range decks or combo decks, and this one's both, so it's going to be hard to get me off of it. But if I was to play a fast deck, I think Mono Red is just real lean, real clean, and it would be really hard to get me off of that if I was going to play an aggro deck, because it's literally you just like chip in a bunch of damage, and then you have the best 4-drop Mono Red's ever seen, pretty much, in the Experimental Frenzy. Like, that card's unbeatable. You cannot beat that card. And so I think if I was going to play aggro, I would play that. I think that deck's a good choice, and I like the version with a bunch of Planeswalkers. I was beating the versions that play like Rekindling Phoenix because a little Teferi just bouncing it and them just getting tempoed all the way back. And I think the Planeswalkers are so good. I think Chandra's super good in the mid-range matchups because she's like this lava axe that draws you a couple cards, or she ultimates and kills you. Like, I think if I recall the way the ultimate works with Chandra, you could play the cards. It's probably not that good in that deck, but like I'm sure by then you'll have like 7 mana, so you'll be like 7 damage to them, like get to play 2 to 3 cards. So like that's still pretty good. It's not as game ending in red. In red, you're just dead. They're just gonna deal like 12 to you or 15 to you that turn. But yeah, so I like Davies' deck. I like Spellbreaker. I like War Boss. I think a key thing to that deck is whenever you draw Llanowar Elf, you got to win those games. You got to make sure your deck's built to win those games. I don't think you're allowed to lose games where you draw Llanowar Elf. If you're playing this deck and you're losing games when you draw Llanowar Elf, don't play this deck. But I think the hard part is going to be winning games you don't draw Llanowar Elf. And I think it does do an all right job with like its threats being pretty good. Grill Chamber Guardian's like a pretty sticky threat, gives you some card advantage, hard to block sometimes. But even like against some decks, when they block it and they make you pump it, sometimes that tempo is just brutal. So I'm interested to see. 23 lands is not a lot either with no explore creatures. So the deck frightens me a little bit, but the power level's high, so I get why you won. Like the deck's good. It's a powerful deck. It goes over the top of people. It flies over with Sarkhan very well. But it's not for me.
It's not for him, Davies. I mean, am I muted? Okay.
I don't have a binder.
That's right. Yeah, if you don't have a binder, you can't play Binder Gruul.
So, actually, tell me once again some of the main cards you would you would keep the 2 Harpooners in.
Yeah, Harpooner was overall pretty good. It killed quite a few things in the air, and when it didn't, it was always big enough to fight something with Domri if that was in play. So it ended up being, we'll call it a terror. The card that was very, very impressive though was Direfleet in the sideboard. That card was just always Necrotal. It was usually 4 mana, kill something. Except for the couple of times where it was 8 mana, cast Commanding Dreadhorde. So
that's ridiculous.
It was pretty spicy. So no, most of the changes are truly just around the removal spells and a few of the sideboard tweaks. The Cindervines probably won't be played because your plan is to hope people aren't on the Nexus deck, and if they are, they just can't have it every time, because if they're not going off on turn 5, you're probably killing them. No, I would say the deck is actually pretty close. The binder was rather complete, and as Andy was saying, I couldn't have put it better. If you can't win the games where you draw Llanowar Elf, you can't win any of the games. So the deck is very, very powerful, but it does fold to, as I believe, Oketra, but I don't have enough testing into that.
No one plays that.
I mean,
yeah, Oketra who?
I mean, I'm thrilled to hear no one plays that, because I am running this back on Saturday. So I really hope that's the case. And for some reason, I see it on like every other table whenever I'm playing a match. So
that makes no sense.
Maybe New York's different. I don't know. I saw it like 3 or 4 times.
All right, Davies, you got to hear me out. I'm going to give you the secret stuff to put in your deck. Cut all your shocks. Do not play that Chandra's card, and play just a bunch of Lightning Strikes. I think Lightning Strike is really good right now. I think it's super good at killing the cheap Planeswalkers. I think killing Wild Growth Walker at instant speed is like kind of backbreaking sometimes. And I think that's you have to have more removal than you have. Cut the Crawl Harpooners and just play more real removal. And I think that would be better for the deck. I think Crawl Harpooner does have some sweet synergy, like you said, with Domri. But I think that is better to me. I think you need more Lightning Strikes. I wouldn't play Shock just because it doesn't kill Wild Growth Walker, which is I think it's a real problem for your deck. It's every time I beat the Gruul deck, it just comes down to Wild Growth Walker, and then I just can't lose. I'm at like 18 life by the time the mid game comes around, and then I Dreadhorde and I win. So I think that's the key, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't have as much experience playing the deck, but from the other side, from the Dreadhorde decks and the Planeswalker decks, Lightning Strike was a nightmare.
Andy, you had mentioned, like this deck is interesting. It plays Planeswalkers and Rekindling Phoenix in the same deck.
Yeah, this thing go big. I think the flyers are a great way to get chip damage in. So here's the thing. When you draw your Llanowar Elf, it doesn't really matter what else you're playing because your 3-drops are so good. But when you don't draw the Llanowar Elf, you need to have staying power. And what the Planeswalkers are is they're staying power, they're aggressive, they're good on, like, if you get to play them a turn earlier. And they give you the reach. Like, it's hard to beat a Rekindling Phoenix. It's hard to beat Sarkhan flying over with the Planeswalkers. And I think that's why it does a little bit of both. Maybe sometimes you could draw the wrong half of your deck, but it's hard when like both halves are pretty much working towards the same goal. When you curve out with this deck, it's going to be very good. And I like the Planeswalkers, and I like Rekindling Phoenix as like a hedge so that you can play the long game.
I think it was already mentioned by the other guys, either in the chat or on the show, that to the Wild Growth Walker thing, that you probably want more lava coils in the sideboard. When I was playing Command the Dreadhorde, the only way I lost to mono red one of the few games was when I played 3 Wild Growth Walkers that were all 3 answered by lava coil, and I couldn't bring any of them back. So that's why I lost. And I think. Otherwise, I'm going to give this deck a spin, Davies. I'm talking to. I know you were talking. You were messaging Alex while we were recording Table for Two. So I know what you're up to, man. I know what you're up to, and I might give this a spin.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, what Andy said is definitely something I'm playing with. For sure, the shocks are going down in number. Because I'm expecting probably a little bit less mono red this time and a little bit less Esper Hero, a lot more Planeswalkers, and Shock is not good against Planeswalkers. But I'm going to be flipping some coins on Lightning Strike versus Chandra's Triumph, because I don't think you want to be Lightning Striking your opponent ever. I'm pretty sure it's always going to be killing a Planeswalker or killing a creature. So you definitely want 3 damage, but I think I might try and hedge for 5 every now and again.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, Davies. It was a pleasure. I know Frankie Richard has been mad that all I keep bringing on are people from Ontario, despite myself being in Quebec. And even posted on Twitter an image of the percentage of listeners we have, like what percentage of listeners are from Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia. I think Ontario is 44%. So the bulk of my base, Ontario, and then Alberta was second most popular, followed by Quebec. But I replied to Frankie, he has to start winning. Outside of you, we got like Rob Anderson, who won a GP ages ago, and I don't know who else. But thank you so much for coming on, Davies.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'll try and win again this weekend, so there's another reason to bring a Quebecer back on.
Sounds good. Elliot, anything you want to end the show with?
Good luck to my team doing the gathering this weekend, and shout out to everyone in it for the gathering. We talk a lot of Magic strategy, but it's all about the gathering in the end. So I love it.
I don't know if this is well, Andy, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Elliot's statement there?
Well, Patrick Chapin once said, "It's not about the magic; it's about the gathering." So you can't go wrong. Elliot's got it right. Here's the thing: is like you lose in Magic, you don't ever lose in the gathering.
I know for a fact that there have been multiple tournaments that Davies has attended with no intention of playing Magic, and he only went for the gathering.
That is true. That is true. I've got multiple GP day 2s where I came to show up, let's be at a Magic tournament, and I happened to rattle off some wins. It's always about the gathering, you guys.
All right. Good luck in Ottawa this Saturday, and we'll see all of you. Why do I keep saying that? You'll see all of us next week. Ciao, guys.